So we'll start with my first comic book, YULEDiED, which again it sounds strange having it here out or hearing it out loud because again I told nobody about these things. I don't talk to anybody about it. I write them in seclusion, and I may have rambled once or twice to my wife about things, but it's a very insular process, and I don't know why. It just is. And the most bizarre thing about working on these things is once you write it and you feel that finality of like, okay, it's written. I've experienced these moments with these characters. It was awesome and fun, and I really enjoyed that. I'm done. I was like, why fucking write it? Or, sorry, I didn't mean to curse. Um, why why even draw it now? Because I feel like I've experienced it, and now the arduous process of having to go in and actually um, design these things is, or not design these things, but draw them out and make them finalized and appealing, and still retain all the life of the sketches. Isn't that the real fun? So, anyways, this is YULEDiED. It started as an Inktober project in 2019. It was inspired by my good friend Sean, who I've mentioned many times on the stream, in his Christmas spirit, which seemed to show up earlier and earlier every year, just like it does at Target and at the grocery stores, a little bit too early. Um, I do think there's something related to current events about why that has happened, and we won't talk about that. Yeah, that was just like this frustration. It's like it's not even Thanksgiving. It's not even Halloween. Can I please experience Halloween before Christmas? Um, and that is what this story is. It's a bunch of little kids who try to summon Santa Claus a couple months too early, and they do it wrong, and Santa comes back wrong or is summoned wrong, and it doesn't go well for Santa or them. Uh, so let me just turn this off and switch to the iPad. Oh, look at it, there it is. And this is my YULEDiED page layouts. I started again. I started with those two images from Inktober, and this is the first one. If you're wondering why is the screen smaller now on here, it's because the iPad is not 4K. I just learned this last week. As sharp and delightful as the screen is, it's not a full 4K resolution. So you're seeing the actual pixels on this canvas within OBS. This is the first image I did, and you could see where it's all starting to go wrong with this fellow here. And for this, because it was a monthly challenge where you were only going to do a page a day or a piece of art a day, I just try to do something as abstract and as presentable as possible within that time frame. And I just thought of like old Sunday morning paper comic strips, so like Garfield or Beetle Bailey. Not even Calvin and Hobbes, because Calvin and Hobbes was like so good. I didn't really connect with that because it felt I could sense his greatness, and I was like, I don't have time for that. But also I think I saw that like way later in the 90s. I didn't get into Calvin and Hobbes until Borders started putting out those really cheap books. So that's where some of the inking is sort of influenced. Not directly, it's more of my remembrance of it all, like how it filtered through my memory of like some of those really quick lines you would get within the Peanuts inking style, and trying to make everything a little bit more rounded, more friendly, in abstract in a way that's manageable. And I thought this was manageable, but here we are years later, written and thumbnailed, and I'm still drawing pages. So we'll get into why I transitioned from my other book to this one. Spoiler alert, very similar story. But that was the first page I did, which ends up being the second page in the story. And this is actually the first page in the story you'll see here. And what I like about, and the reason why this is a slow process is because I consider it my first piece of art, and I want to lovingly craft it, and I want to massage the sculptures and have beautiful line work. So it's going to take time, and I'm going to learn along the way, and that's why it's going so slow. But the strange thing is working on the iPad sort of makes me feel like I'm working underwater, like I'm going like, if you ever played Virtual Fighter 2 underwater, it feels like working like that, where you're just very slowly being able to like make your marks and assess your work because it's on such a small screen. When I'm working on a giant monitor in Photoshop and I can zoom in and out very quickly and work on a face like almost 1.5 feet tall, I can do this kind of style fairly quickly. But now that we have 2 kids, there's no way in hell I can sit at a desk as much as I would need to be able to efficiently work in Photoshop. So I'm forced to work on the iPad, and it is very fun, as frustrating as the iPad in Procreate is. Um, it's equally as exciting to be able to have it at hand at all times. And when I'm talking off cuff, I sort of black out, so I don't always know exactly what I had said previously. So I'll just move on to the next one. This is the second image that was done for the Inktober. And also, I'll post up the brushes, but I can't remember the names of them. It was some guy had posted his Photoshop brushes, and maybe I got them from our buddy Dan. But there's 2 watercolor brushes that I can use as ink brushes, and that's what you're seeing here. And one of them has this really awesome double line as you're drawing, and it kind of feels like dry brush, but also like just this scratchy ink, and you could sort of build your line almost like a colored pencil or a coal erase, so you can sort of like feel your way to the final line. And you can see here, like as you zoom in, this isn't very tidy. There's not a lot of, it's a little rough and abrasive here and there, but as you zoom out, I feel like it comes together and it almost feels like it has some elegance to it and some simplicity and motion. And then there's another brush where, yeah, you can see that double line right here. So like the mark making was very important to me because I wasn't relying on rendering or paint strokes. The quality of the calligraphy needed to be very appealing. Um, as we get into working sessions, I'll show the difference between the 2 different brushes. Here's another page of them sort of realizing what they have done. And this book is 8 by 11. So think of it sort of between comics and picture books, like children's picture books. So 8 by 10 aspect ratio. And this is another hilarious thing about working on the iPad within Procreate itself, because you need some sort of hack to get around the limitations of Procreate. So you end up making an 8.5 by 11 canvas, and then you make a layer off on its own pixels, and then you add the bleed by expanding the canvas, and then that layer that is the actual 8.5 by 11, that'll describe where the bleed is supposed to lie for printing purposes. And I found some YouTube video that gave a tutorial on how to prep Procreate files for print. In this one, I'm just gonna pan around and show some of the art and not get too much into the story. And this is Santa planting his roasted chestnuts, and they turn into delightful little gremlin elves. The symbology. They just kind of crawl out of the ground once they've grown. And this is the difficulty I'm having working on an iPad. Like I can't gauge the proportion of my line weight for print so well on this, ironically, on this screen. So here, I think I'm getting too fidelitous. I'm getting too small with some of my marks, because the page is only going to be so tall, 8 inches tall, right? And I still, like, I do want to consider how it's going to appear digitally on websites and things like that, now that it's cut up in different ways. But that printed page is like the main concern at the moment. And if I scroll down here, I could show you some of, and this was a big deal, like even from my other comic, which I'll show, plus this one, I always felt like, for an odd reason, I needed to have very presentable, nice sketches for my designs. And I think it was Miyazaki, like I finally, like years later, I came to the realization that like the book is the thing. Like stop trying to make good looking concept designs that make you feel good and that you want respect from, and embrace what Miyazaki does and just do, but his are masterful and beautiful and wonderful, but like the story illustrations he does to build the story of his movie before he starts storyboarding, those loose watercolor and pencil sketches where they're very loose and expressive, and they're not overly labored. And that was my sort of coming to light, is do not labor, do not make your design sketches for public consumption. Like they should just be for the book, and if they do end up looking decent, great. But this was some of the first concept art I did for those little elves. And again, like I look at this painting, I'm like, oh, that's kind of shitty and gross. I don't really love the way it looks. And this is me just working on the iPad. This is the first iPad with the first Apple Pencil. So I really was having a problem working with those tools. So I didn't want to show that to anybody. And then I think years later, I ended up drawing this guy here. And this is where I feel like I nailed the in-between phase of like, because it has to have a range of like slightly off kilter, kind of cute, and then going full feral, almost like a gremlin, as you see here with the creepy teeth. So towards the end, you'll see a version of these elves, which are very much the palatable, kid-friendly ones. But through most of the book, you're just seeing the little gremlins that are chasing these guys down. And here's an example of how I would thumbnail out the pages. So this is after the script was written and I knew what pages needed to be thumbnailed. And this is just about as far as I go. And this is them in a grocery store. And then bursting into somebody's house, stealing something. And then them leaving that other guy's house who's a carpenter. And then I have another page where it's all of I find this to be the most helpful. And at this point, I have to still actually get this printer synced up to my iPad so that I can print out full resolution print versions of these things, so I can start to adjust my artwork depending on how it actually looks in print. But seeing this together is really exciting and a great way to state, or for me to be able to understand the pacing of the story and how it's laying out and the rhythms of it, and like also like what are the acts or the structure overall. But again, very super loose. And this is like where most of the fun is had, is like all of the earlier stages where you're playing with animation and you're playing with the emotion, and then and then later you have to do the hard drawing. And you're like, good grief! I hope the funness comes through in the end. But yeah, like it is like I feel like animating within the comic book has to be some of the most joyous parts of the process. This is one of the last pages I was working on, and I'm just trying to use rhythms and action lines to really push the cartooniness of this moment, where like all of the heads are sort of still, and then I want the bodies having these really squash and stretch motions. Like you can track each head and see what characters, like almost like they're like a freeze frame in space, and then ideally the bodies feel a little bit more emotion than that. They are stealing a pumpkin. I really do feel like in another alternate reality, I would have loved to have been a storyboard artist or an animator, but not here, not today. And because there's so much to do in this book, and I have to find like little. We have a 4-month-old second kid, and I got to take like any 5-minute chunks I can. So if I'm feeling stressed out, but I still want to work on something, and what I mean by like work on something, I mean like you're wearing the baby in a baby carrier, and the iPad's on the counter, and you want to like start sketching over to do more of a final sketch for your page layout. Like those are the 5 minutes I'm trying to find throughout each of the days. And then this YouTube channel sort of like blew all that all out of the water because there was so many little tiny things you needed to focus on to get this thing up and running. But now hopefully it's done and I can just kind of skate through it and actually work on what we're here for. But again, like I love the posing and I love the animation. Like in animation, like even when we get into design feedback, like using animation as a key word for like understanding that the character lives beyond your design, and also like how do you feel the animation as you're just designing that static form. Oh, this is going to be Miyazaki's car, like his real life car that I think he based some of his stuff on, and then just old 70s. So this whole book takes place sort of in a 70s. Both my books in this alternate reality 70s realm. We don't want any smartphones or technological nonsense muddying up a fun story. And this is them at not Trader Joe's, but Barter Giuseppe's. And I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with this, but I'm doing a version of the little guy from Tetris Plus that kind of climbs up the Tetris blocks as you're playing. So he's going to be the like I'll try to change it enough, right? So it's not that guy, but it is very reminiscent of that character to be the mascot for this Trader Joe's like um, grocery store, and then like a city overview of them running, and then the gremlins are gonna or gremlins, the elves. Sorry, this is off the cuff, a little unstructured, so I hope this is I'm not droning on too much. And I like this idea too, where like you're using in other comics have done this, and I've seen examples of this growing up. But like the idea of like showing keyframe animation within an actual panel is really exciting to me. And because I don't have final designs, um, I throw in every page of the character, and like I have to go back to the original and put this model on this, because this was done in like less than a day for an online art challenge back in 2019. So now I have to go back here and just slightly finesse this design to sort of sync it up with the other pages that I've been doing. What do we got here? I think that's about it for YULEDiED. Um, very joyous, but much slower working on the iPad than in Photoshop. So we'll see if we can speed that up. And now I'll go on to my next comic project, which is Tay, and that's short for the main character. Her nickname, Shantae.